And tonight, we're not just burying a company, we're exhuming a lie. Welcome to the wake.
The human propensity for pattern recognition, even amidst a vast amount of noise, is a double-edged sword. Recently, the YouTube channel Gothic Therapy has thrown journalistic integrity to the wind, unleashing an expose on the foundational origins of Sweet Baby Inc., revealing evidence of a clandestine co-founder with alleged ties to the Canadian government. This narrative garnered significant traction, attracting commentary from the likes of Smash JT, Tectone, and Vera Dark. A kernel of factual data, overwhelmed by confirmation bias and underpinned by far-fetched statistical inferences, resulted in a grand conspiracy theory. An intricate tapestry woven with threads of suspicion rather than evidence, and I've unraveled it.
A man named Terrence Jason Huberts. A name you've never heard because Kim Belair has never once said it.
Not anywhere.
I haven't been able to find anybody that's heard anything about this guy.
Wait, you mean this Jason Huberts? Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Continue. Gothic Therapy's analysis uncovered incorporation documents tying a Terrence Jason Huberts to Sweet Baby Inc.'s foundings. The 2018 documents show his name as the first shareholder operating out of Montreal, Quebec. Through a series of leaps of logic, they speculate this mystery man to be veterinarian turned politician Terry Huberts from Victoria, British Columbia, stating,
Archived government records show a man named Terry Huberts served as a member of the British Columbia legislature from 1986 to 1991. Same last name, same province.
What? No? Montreal, Quebec, and Victoria, BC are nearly the opposite ends of the country. Now, when dealing with another topic later in the video, they do correct this by stating,
different city, different province.
So it's not a big point of contention, but it is an extra inconsistency in their scripting and writing worth noting, as anyone who only watched the first portion of the video and lacked knowledge of Canadian geography would have been misinformed. So who is Terry Huberts? Born in 1946, Huberts was a member of the Social Credit Conservative Party, serving in the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia from 1986 to 1991. Now, the Social Credit Party itself has an interesting trajectory. While it started with roots in social credit policies, it evolved significantly, shedding that original ideology to become a platform for fiscal, social, and Christian conservative values. Hubert's tenure specifically coincided with what's known as the Bill Vander Zalm era, a period characterized by pronounced social conservatism. This meant an emphasis on traditional family structures, conventional gender roles, specific views on sexual relations, national patriotism, and established religious traditions. To draw a parallel for those more familiar with American politics, their ideological leanings during this time were akin to the further right Republican values. It's a political stance that, to put it mildly, diverges quite sharply from the Sweet Baby Inc. business model. Gothic Therapy attempts to definitively link Terry Huberts to Terrence Jason Huberts by first seeking his full legal name, which proved unsuccessful. So then their focus shifted to incorporation filings. They discovered that Terrence Jason Huberts incorporated another business, 6470602 Canada Limited, listing its office address as 475 Elgin Street, apartment 1608 in Ottawa, Ontario. Gothic Therapy then tries to draw a connection to Terry Huberts' veterinary clinic located at 475-777 Royal Oak Drive, Victoria, BC. Their assertion hinges on what they consider a statistical anomaly.
2 cities, 2 decades apart, with the same suite number.
We ran the numbers. Factoring in the name rarity, generational naming, and the suite match, the odds of this being a coincidence are 1 in 100 million.
However, this argument fundamentally misrepresents the addresses. 475 Elgin Street is a permanent building address in Ottawa. In contrast, Suite 475 is the Victoria address, which refers to a unit within the larger permanent address of 777 Royal Oak Drive. It becomes significantly less statistically relevant when you realize you're comparing a permanent address number to essentially an apartment number on any street in any city in all of Canada, as again, these addresses are nearly an entire country apart. Kim Belair, a co-founder and arguably the public face of Sweet Baby Inc., once hosted a podcast called The Sexiest Podcast. A promotional image from an episode of that show featuring special guest Jason Huberts playfully notes that they forgot to take a photo, which implies the edited face in the image was indeed of Huberts. Now, this was in 2017, so that would make Terry Huberts 71 years old. Now, I can't definitively rule out the possibility that this isn't Terry Huberts from British Columbia. I mean, Perhaps he has that Benjamin Button's disease, but I'd say the odds
are 1 in 100 million.
Gothic Therapy did, however, uncover another connection. It appears that Terry, in an interview, mentions having young children, specifically 2 boys, one of whom is named Jason. As fate would have it, this Jason is indeed Jason Huberts, Terry Huberts' son. Now, I won't disclose how I was able to find the details, as I feel an obligation to preserve individual anonymity, particularly for those like Jason who meticulously cultivate an obscured online presence. But suffice to say, I just went around the internet like, Jason! Jason! A deeper dive revealed an additional entity incorporated by Jason Huberts in Montreal in 2021. This venture, a marketing firm, appears to be independently established, lacking any overt connections to Sweet Baby Inc., governmental bodies, or even the gaming industry as a whole. Further investigation into the corporation unearthed a familial link to Jason's brother, who was previously mentioned by Terry in the interview documents. This discovery facilitated the identification of Jason's consistent online aliases across various social media platforms. However, they too were locked down and seemingly no longer in use. All this research culminated with me finding his mother's Facebook profile located in British Columbia. A public post from her account detailing her marital status garnered numerous comments, one of which pointedly inquired about Terry's well-being. This gave me enough contextual evidence to conclude that this Jason Huberts, whom had a podcast appearance with Kim Belair, was indeed Terry Huberts' son. Jason Huberts is not a politician, has no affiliation with the Canadian government, and was not involved in developing any legislative frameworks. As Tectone himself can attest, it's simply not fair to hold a parent's past against their children. So if it was Jason who signed on, the connection with the government is no longer substantiated. Now, I anticipate the immediate counter-argument here will be that Jason still holds government affiliation by means of his father, and this specifically does not disprove that it was still his father who signed off on the original incorporation documents. So let's dissect this further. A, we've already established Terry's political leanings during his tenure were decidedly right of center, fundamentally at odds with Sweet Baby Inc.'s mission statement. B, his government service concluded in 1991, a full 27 years prior to Sweet Baby Inc.'s incorporation. C, it's crucial to note his political involvement was with the Legislative Assembly of British Columbia, a provincial government, and not the federal government of Canada. Therefore, any inferences drawn from his political past would at best suggest a provincial level entanglement with Sweet Baby Inc., limited specifically to British Columbia. The sensationalized allusion to the entire Canadian government is not even remotely supported in Gothic Therapy's report and is a comically large leap of fallacy.
There is one last thing that you should see.
Now let's further scrutinize the specific legislation so nefariously portrayed in the video.
In 1989, as Minister of Parks, Terry Huberts authored a government policy framework, one that outlined how the private sector could embed itself into public systems, private contractors operating within government parks, silently, efficiently, invisible to the public eye.
Sound familiar?
The document's title explicitly states it's an update on contracting for the BC National Parks. This type of contracting, it's noted, has been ongoing since 1983, which is a full 5 years before Terry took over as the Minister of Parks. So what precisely did these supposedly dastardly, shady private sector actors actually do? Brace yourselves. They clean toilets.
Oh, fuck. Oh my God.
The utilization of private contractors in public parks was actually previously practiced by a multitude of other provinces, but unlike their regulations, Terry was remarkably stringent, prohibiting private sector contractors from establishing shops, gas stations, or private cottages within the parks themselves. He also put contingencies in place to ensure that no provincial park staff would be laid off as a result of this program. What I find to be ironic and quite comical is that the section of the document specifically highlighted in Gothic Therapy's video, it actually in fact outlines Terry's 12 proposed guidelines for BC parks to effectively limit the power of the private sector in these areas. These proposed guidelines emphasize that preserving the environment and parks heritage takes precedence over the financial interests of the private sector. It prohibits the sale of land resources and aims to ensure that all members of society retain a right to free and reasonable access to the parks. Not as bad as they made it sound, huh? This leads me to one of two conclusions. Either Gothic Therapy fundamentally didn't comprehend the document and made assertions on a complete whim, or they did understand the document and actively decided to misrepresent the information to better suit their narrative. Either way, this video report perfectly encapsulates the sensationalist, misinformed, and confirmation bias-ridden reporting that undermines the legitimate critiques within the anti-woke and anti-DEI movements. As someone committed to discerning truth, I'm frankly exhausted by this type of agenda-driven journalism from both sides of the spectrum. What starts as a kernel of truth gets twisted and warped into a narrative so obscured by bias and logical leaps that it almost presents itself as satire. I find it remarkable how readily online communities pivot to outrage, transforming nascent discussions into self-sustaining narratives, and the sheer virality of these stories is astonishing. Consider the viewership numbers at the time of recording this. Gothic Therapy's video has over 19,000. Smash JT's 98,000. Tectone, 51. Vera Dark, 26. That's nearly 200,000 individuals who have, by now, solidified an opinion, propagated a specific narrative, and likely shared it within their social circles, all centered around the unsubstantiated notion that the Canadian federal government is dismantling the games industry. Whereas a more nuanced discussion, such as the one that I'm attempting to offer in this video, I'll be fortunate if it reaches 50 sets of eyes. A fraction of the audience, a mere drop in the ocean of misinformation. All that said though, I do want to be very clear that this channel is not a sanctuary for DEI support. I in fact fundamentally disagree with Sweet Baby Inc.'s operational framework. What sets me apart is an unwillingness to compromise my intellectual or journalistic integrity just for the sake of a few sensationalized clicks.
You can run, little baby, but we will always find you.
Oh, shut the fuck up!